Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, it's a journalist roundtable. We'll look at the week's top stories, including Adelita Grijalva's convincing win in the Democratic primary for Arizona's 7th congressional district. The journalist roundtable is next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your public television station.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. It's Friday, and that means it's time for the Journalists Roundtable. And joining us tonight, Cameron Sanchez from KJZZ Radio, Dennis Welch from Arizona's Family, and Wayne Schutsky, also from KJZZ Radio. Now, before we get to tonight's roundtable, a quick update on a story of special interest to our viewers. Congress voted overnight to zero out federal funding already appropriated for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which distributes funds to public media outlets like Arizona PBS. PBS and NPR both get a small share of funding from federal sources, but the impact will be felt, especially in smaller market TV and radio stations. Now, of note, overall federal budget appropriations still need to be considered and approved by the end of September, and there is word that it's possible that new federal spending plans could include PBS receiving funding for next year and then on an annual basis after that. And also of note, NPR and PBS still have lawsuits in the courts citing protections under the Public Broadcasting Act and the First Amendment. All right, so we got a couple of folks here from KJZZ Radio. Let's talk, without getting too deeply into this, because you're not spokespeople for the station, as I'm not a spokesperson for Arizona PBS, but we did watch what was going on. And Cameron, we'll start with you. Arizona's congressional delegation pretty much along party lines on this, correct?
Yes, and that's been the case for a while. We spoke with some of our representatives earlier this week, senators and congressmen, and I mean in my capacity as a journalist. I was on a webinar call with Mark Kelly, and basically up until the last second, the Democrats were pushing for Republicans to reconsider and making arguments for things like how this will mostly affect smaller rural stations and how the impact involves educational programs and emergency notification systems and not just, you know, your daily news.
Yeah.
But that was apparently not an effective argument.
Yeah, and Wayne, we should mention that Senator Gallego actually had an amendment that he presented on the floor that would focus on getting broadcasting to some of these stations on the reservations. That one went nowhere as well.
That's right. And not only Senator Gallego, Senator Kelly tried to introduce an actual Republican amendment from one of the few Republicans who voted against this. Senator Collins, that would have preserved some of the funding for local stations versus, you know, it still would have taken those cuts to NPR National, PBS National, that kind of thing. And he said, you know, we still don't like this package even with this amendment, but this will at least blunt some of the effects on those local stations that are really relied on those communities. Sometimes they're the only source of news in those communities.
And those, they're going to get hit, Dennis, hit hard.
And I just, you know, want to say, like, you know, you take a step back. It's like finally, you know, Republicans have been talking about this for quite a while now. I'm old enough to remember the presidential election back in 2012 when Mitt Romney was talking about this, and they were, you know, going after him for wanting to defund Big Bird, if you remember all of that. And I know you guys are not spokespeople for your respective stations, but I'll say it is very disappointing for a lot of people who work at these stations. I've known and worked alongside with them, and I know their viewers and their listeners depend on some of this essential information coming out of there. And it's too bad for those communities, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that, and to see what happens if there's any blowback that you know, as this budget process moves on.
Yeah, and real quickly, again, you've got the overall budget that has to be done by the end of September, or else you're going to have a government shutdown. But we're waiting that big brouhaha as that comes here in the fall, and there is word that there might be a way to get something in there. But I would find it unlikely that a bunch of folks who just said no would all of a sudden say a small y yes.
Yeah, I mean, this money was already approved in a bipartisan manner. I mean, that Congressman Greg Stanton, Democrat from the Tempe area, told me that when I just spoke with him about this recently. He's like, that is kind of one of the biggest disappointments here, is that this wasn't a matter of Republicans not being on board with this funding. They just voted for it just a few months ago. It was a matter of the president basically dictating to his Republican Congress people that this is what I want and you better do it.
And last point on this, Dennis, as you mentioned, this is Republicans in general have kind of talked about this for a long time. I mean, President Trump even mentioned it. I'm the one who did it. There are a lot of things that President Trump is doing that Republicans have wanted to do for a while. He is getting it done.
He's getting done on that front. I mean, it is no secret he has had a very combative relationship with legacy media, publicly funded media out there. He's going to take credit because this is something his base They've supported him on this. I mean, we've all been out there on the campaign trail with President Trump. We've seen how they react to us there. So I think it's going to be a popular move with him. So I'm not surprised that he's taking credit for what he would call a big victory in this situation.
And he's got the Wall Street Journal in his sights right now for a variety of reasons. Well, we're not going to talk about that. Cameron, we are going to move on here and talk about, we had a primary.
Yes,
we had a
we did.
primary this week, Republican and Democratic, but it's a heavily Democratic district, and lots of folks were watching, and that wasn't much to watch, though, was it?
Well, Adelita Grijalva ran away with it, basically, and that wasn't a surprise to everyone, but there had been a lot of media attention on Deja Fox, who was the Gen Z activist coming out of kind of left field, like the dark horse candidate I've heard her called. At least nationally, she got a lot of attention, and of course the other candidate was Daniel Hernandez, who has a bunch of name recognition in some political circles. His family's established in Tucson, his sisters are lawmakers, he's a former lawmaker, and he had a quite poor showing, I think it's fair to say, coming in third place, actually. And that, to me, was almost the most interesting part because Grijalva, she had the name recognition, she has the experience, and it looks like she's going to be pretty much the de facto person.
What I felt like some of the national media coming in here was, it felt a little bit like they were rooting for a real horse race coming in at the end here, because it's an off-year election, not a lot going on, and people were trying to draw comparisons from Deja Fox to Zohran Mamdani in the New York City mayoral race. I mean, heck, Politico had a story up the day before the election saying that Deja Fox is the social media influencer who could be on her way to Congress. Didn't quite work out that way, as you point out. It was a landslide victory for Adelita Grijalva, but again, it felt a little bit like the national media rooting for a bit of a narrative and a slow political season.
Yeah, and we did a podcast. I spoke with Deja Fox, and she was an interesting candidate. So I see where the compelling nature of her story. She is from Southern Arizona. She called out Jeff Flake years ago as a high school student for cutting Planned Parenthood, and she would have been the youngest member of Congress. That being said, Grijalva always was the favorite in this, given the name recognition, given her time, and that narrative about her being compared to the New York City mayoral election doesn't really track for so many reasons. Chief among them is that an argument could be made that Adelita Grijalva was the more progressive candidate. I mean, Deja Fox worked on Kamala Harris's campaign, a more mainstream Democrat. So I think a lot, like Dennis said, a lot of those narratives that were kind of being forced on the race didn't really apply.
Yeah, and Cameron, what does it say about the idea that just Democrats are saying we just need someone young, we just need someone with social media, we need someone progressive? They got all that down there in Tucson, and they got their hat handed to them.
Well, I think there's something to be said for if you have a lot of followers nationally and a lot of attention nationally or on social media, that doesn't translate to people in Congressional District 7 showing up to the polls in an off year for an obscure special primary, which is what you really need. That's the voting base, and it's difficult to get, and she just couldn't drum it up. So it's really not that surprising, but I wonder if this means there's some other political future for her, and we haven't heard what her next steps are yet.
I think if you can get that kind of attention, politics has always been, even before social media, been about getting attention on yourself. And when you can get that kind of attention on yourself, I think Deja Fox definitely has a future in politics somewhere. I don't know where that's going to be. I wouldn't be surprised if there is some pressure on her, or people are trying to convince her, hey, why don't you move on up into David Schweikert's district, or move over to Juan Ciscomani's district and maybe challenge them next year.
Yeah, as far as Daniel Hernandez, as Cameron mentioned, that's a poor showing, third in a realistic field of three. There were other candidates, but he didn't do well at all.
No, and it's not the first time. He ran for Congress in the neighboring district the last cycle, and also lost in the primary by a significant amount to Kirsten Engel, who was another former lawmaker. They were kind of on similar par when it came to name recognition, and he fell, I believe, 20 points behind her. So it just seems difficult to envision a political future for him, at least at this level. Never count anyone out from coming back to the state legislature, but in terms of Congress, it does not seem to be in the cards for him.
Daniel Hernandez really took me by surprise in their primary debate when he said that he was in support of mining and everyone else said that they were not. And he almost pitched himself as the most conservative candidate in a super progressive district. So I'm not sure why he did that, but I think that that's probably not something that landed with the voters.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's the kind of finish for someone like Hernandez that would, I think, put the brakes on any kind of immediate future to his political career. I'd say, like, even saying returning to the to the state legislature. I mean, I think his best shot is we see him in the next year or two, kind of going back as a lobbyist.
But same question here. What does it say about Deja Fox? What does it say about young, progressive, social media, et cetera? What does it say about Democrats running in Democratic primaries who want that center, who want to be a little less progressive, perhaps, than other? Or is this just basically the district of Grijalva?
I think it's more of the latter. That name,
Yes.
they voted for that name for 20 plus years, and they voted for that name again. And it's not just the name, it's what he stood for. They liked his policies, and his daughter has promised to be a continuation of those policies. Like Cameron said, Daniel Hernandez's comments about mining didn't land because guess who was a big proponent of both, tribal rights and, reining in all that mining for environmental protections? It was Raul Grijalva, and they liked that. And so they voted for a continuation of the person that they had voted for 20 years. That being said, Deja Fox getting 20% of the vote isn't nothing for someone who maybe had a national profile, but whose name recognition in the district itself was fairly low. That is still an accomplishment, which lends itself to, as both my fellow folks here said, is she does have a future somewhere in politics.
And it's a real talent, too, to kind of exploit that, to be able to get that kind of attention on her late in that race. I was at least impressed by that. But, it wasn't just like Politico, it was the New York Times. There's all these other publications coming out there and talking to her. She, presents well. She's good on the stump. She's good on social media. Again, can't say enough. I do see that there's a future for her. Just the question of where it's going to be.
All right, Karen, we have yet another, I think we're up to 23 lawsuits from the Attorney General against the Trump administration. A couple this week. One was Obamacare, and the other with this education fund suit, which we did have some news today on that. What do we know about that?
Yeah, it was education funding freeze. A bunch of education funding to all the states was frozen, $120-ish million for Arizona, and a small chunk of that was released today for after-school programs.
Okay, so that's one of them. And then, Cameron, we had the other one, which I believe was the Obamacare suit, which basically shortens the enrollment period, makes signing up more difficult, these sorts of things.
Yeah, I think it also tries to remove Dreamers and prevent them.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
So, like you said, there's a lot of lawsuits to keep track of with Mays. These are just the latest two, and presumably not the last ones that we're going to see. She's already had some success with the education one. I think it makes a lot of sense that she's doing this. It's no surprise to anyone. It's not clear yet on the medical one how successful she can be.
I think the argument was that it was unconstitutional. They're all of them basically are saying it's unconstitutional the way the president did this, but also that this would cause like 1.8 million folks to lose insurance because of the difficulties in signing up. And
here in Arizona, it costs what, they estimate it's going to cost hundreds of thousands of people their health care coverage, and so. When you look at it from Mays' perspective, it's not only is this a good lawsuit to be filed because she believes in all this stuff, but it makes pretty good for politics as well when you start talking about going after people with Medicaid and health care coverage. I think it's pretty good politics for an AG who is up for re-election next year.
And one last point on this, it would also force the state to pick up costs. Is the state ready to pick up costs?
Governor Hobbs has repeatedly said when we've asked her about whether it's the Medicaid cuts that went through in the budget bill or things like this, that the state does not have the money available to pick up Medicaid, additional Medicaid costs, SNAP, food assistance costs, all these different things. I mean, we saw that as our budget negotiations played out, and there's kind of a thin margin of extra dollars there. There's rainy day funds and things like that, but again, that's not ongoing revenues that would be needed to solidify funding for something like Medicaid.
Anyone want to talk about Tom Horn apparently losing his dual language program appeal to the appeals court? We don't want to talk about that? Anybody? Anyone?
It's Tom Horn's continued war against these kind of programs. I mean, it goes back like what, 20 years or whenever he was first like a superintendent of public instruction. So it's just more of the same, I guess, coming from this superintendent of public instruction.
And the appeals court basically said you don't have standing because it's not your department that's doing this. It's supposed to be the Board of Education, and it is the Department of Education. So
and then he tried a few different ways to file this lawsuit. And the court repeatedly says you do not have standing. Yeah,
and apparently he's going to pledge now to the Arizona State Supreme Court. So. I'll ask the same question here in a few weeks again, just to get you guys. All right, here's one I know you want to talk about, Cameron. Who is Robert Branscombe?
That's a great question. He is the former chair of the Arizona Democratic Party. He was only chair for about 6 months, and it was a really tumultuous reign. the people who basically he is supposed to get reelected don't like him, and they moved their fundraising operations elsewhere. It was kind of a disaster. There were a litany of problems, from union negotiations to how much he was getting paid, to the general party finances. And so all of that accumulated in this big vote to oust him, which got delayed. And there was this awful 4-hour-long marathon meeting that I sat through, which was just like miserable. And they had a lot of technical difficulties, but finally voted to oust him with a really big portion of the people who were there and showed up and voted.
Yeah, I mean, this sounds just like, oh, goodness gracious, what's going on with these folks?
It's just kind of on brand for Democrats right now. You got that national media out there, like the Democrats lost in the wilderness and stuff like that. Well, this isn't helping. He was just elected, 6 months ago by a wide margin. And then, you needed a lot of voters, a lot of rank and file Democrats to get rid of him. And I would say it's a special talent if you can upset every statewide elected official that you need to get reelected. And you know what? He did that. So, if you do that, you're going to be paying consequences, and this is what happened at the end of just 6 months.
Is it because he couldn't balance a budget? Is it because money going out wasn't reaching the same level as money coming in? Or were there other things involved, and something that he mentioned was racism?
He did mention racism. He did have a vocal kind of contingent of supporters who pointed that he is the first black chair of the Arizona Democratic Party. But it's hard to ignore just the litany of controversies he was able to compile within just 6 months. As Cameron mentioned, the union representing party staff has accused him of negotiating in bad faith, said they're going to file a complaint with the feds on that. Unions and Democrats usually go together like peanut butter and jelly, yet here they're fighting. There was the clash with the statewide electeds, where after just a few months they said they lost faith in him after he accused Mark Kelly and others of backstabbing. There was then ongoing fights with that, and then there was this ultimate move to oust him, which was led by a local Democratic Party leader who had actually voted for him months ago, but said he's not doing the job.
But a lot of them voted for him, apparently. I mean, he won pretty decisively.
He won pretty decisively, and I'd say, too, it does come down to, you look at the fundraising numbers for the state Republican Party, and they're not doing well. I can't say this enough to people, the chairwomen of these parties. Their number one job is to raise money, and increasingly more and more we're seeing that these chairmen are trying to get into different areas, trying to get attention for themselves, almost acting like they're the elected. And we started seeing that with Kelly Ward when she was running the Republican Party out there. And I think with Branscombe, I think he should have focused a little bit more on just raising money, finding candidates, going out there and recruiting them instead of picking fights with people like Mark Kelly or Ruben Gallego, the governor.
I mean, goodness gracious, Kelly, Gallego, Hobbs, Fontes, Mays. I mean, all of them.
And the county chairs.
Yeah.
I was shocked that he wanted the job, because that sounds like a nightmare I would have, like having to represent people who hate me and not really even being able to do my job because they've taken the fundraising portion elsewhere. And like Dennis said, really the role of state party is it's about making money, it's about getting out the vote, registering voters ideally, and getting your people reelected, and none of that was happening. So, but
again, this kind of maybe for some this is a little bit of inside baseball. Most folks don't know the party chairs and never really care, but it's not a good look for a party that's already on the ropes.
No, 2.5 hours into the meeting, and I was about ready to pull my hair out. And people inside the meeting were confused. They were like, what is happening here? Why are we acting like this? It definitely gives a bad narrative to Democrats. And the one rumor that I'll bring up that I've heard is that there's a possibility of maybe Raquel Tehran coming back in as chair of the party. She said she's considering it. I think that that's kind of the next question for them, because they have an interim chair serving as the head now, but it's like, who comes in next to take the reins and ideally get them back on track, if not for 2026, then at least for 2028.
And ultimately who the chair is, like from a macro look, doesn't matter. Like, it's as Dennis said, their job is to be behind the scenes, making sure the machinery is working to get these people elected. Who the chair is only matters when it's not working to this degree, because they're running out of money. The treasurer says they could be out of money by the end of the year. They didn't have a budget in place yet, which means they can't hire staff. So that machinery was just quickly falling apart behind the scenes, which was the reason they redirected all that funding to Navajo County.
And again, one last point on this, Dennis. I mean, I mentioned that the party seems like Democrats everywhere seem like they're on the ropes right now. But in Arizona, you've got so many state and federal office holders who are Democrats. That should be a shining light from which you attract bucks And I don't see, apparently the bucks aren't flowing in.
Especially when you start talking about pick and fight and losing the faith of Mark Kelly. Who can raise more money than Mark Kelly? I mean, not a whole lot of people. But I also kind of want to make this point, too. I mean, this is all happening, too, at a time where I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the state parties like this are losing influence. I mean, I think they're there as a conduit to lessen the cost of your campaign when it comes to mail. But candidates now increasingly can go other places and find money and donors, and they can go other places and find organizations that are going to help them get out the vote. I think those are traditionally in the past have been big strengths of the party. I think they're increasingly becoming less and less relevant as we move on.
Especially to a candidate like a Deja Fox, who can go on social media and probably do a lot of fundraising on her own that doesn't have to go through party, correct?
Yeah, that's right, and I think that was the central tension here. I think Branscombe came into the job thinking this was going to be an old school political party, him at the top. And if you read between the lines of those back and forth angry letters, he was mad that Mark Kelly was big timing him. And Mark, I think, and from Mark Kelly's point of view, he's like, I'm the biggest fundraiser in this state for Democrats. And if you want this party to be successful, you need to get in line with me. And again, this is me reading between the lines on these. This isn't any interviews I've done or anything like that. But I
was going to say, if like Mark Kelly is big timing, it is because Mark Kelly is kind of big time when it comes to fundraising.
Exactly. So yeah, just to back up your point there, is just that Mark Kelly, Katie Hobbs, Chris Mays, Adrian Fontes, they are the Democrats who have won statewide office in a state that favors Republicans. And so they've kind of earned the ability to kind of direct the party, whether they're the chairman or not.
Cameron, the No Labels Party, apparently...
I almost forgot about that.
I was going to say, you could possibly run in the No Labels Party if you'd like to.
Oh, please. No, I really don't want to. There was a lawsuit on this topic because the No Labels Party is somewhat new. I think 2023 is when they officially were started. And the leaders of the No Labels Party said that they really just wanted to run candidates for president and vice president. But weirdly, they didn't do that. And they also got mad that people wanted to run on other races, like local races under the No Labels label.
Right.
And so they went to court over it, and the court said, no, people can run if they want to. And it's weird that you guys said you were going to run someone for president and vice president and then didn't. So stop.
So in other words, the No Labels Party wants labels?
I guess they don't want labels, or they want labels, but they don't want certain candidates, so they want to be able to pick their candidates.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about a party of like 36,000 people. It's a registration right there, or something like that. So I mean, it's what strikes me is this is the problem when you start talking about third-party politics, and we've heard a lot of talk about that recently with Elon Musk talking about he's going to start a third party. Everybody loves the idea of a third party until you give that third party an identity and a face to it, and then you run into the kind of problems that we're seeing now with this No Labels Party.
People talk about how Republicans, Democrats, the parties are too controlled by political insiders. Well, this is what happens when you have a party completely created by political insiders who think that they're separating themselves from, but they're just creating more of the nonsense that we've been talking about with these other parties. Because to the normal person, when they hear this story, they think, yeah, you can, if I'm registered as a No Labels, if I'm registered as a Republican, I can go run for, the legislature as a Republican or a No Labels, whatever I am. Like, who can tell me I can't? And that's essentially what the judge, the Ninth Circuit, said here is that the voters' right to participate in democracy outweighs your right to pick and choose which candidates choose your label or no label or whatever we want to call it.
Yeah, party members decide, not party leaders.
I guess I just feel bad for the people who wanted to participate in this and kind of got jerked around because they didn't have an opportunity to do what this party promised that they were going to get to do. And so I feel bad for those people because they're kind of the victims here.
All right, so will we hear more about the No Labels Party, or will we?
Oh God, I hope
more information of the No Labels Party?
Oh Lord, I hope not. I mean, I don't know. Maybe to Wayne's point, I mean, this was something that was created by insiders. There's been a lot of questions circulating around them since they started. So again, with the number of registered party members, I don't know how much of an influence or an impact they're going to be able to make if they do field some candidates here in the upcoming midterm elections. I gotta think it's not much more than the Libertarian candidate.
Before we go, we have a couple minutes left here before we go, and I know we talked about this with a different panel, so I want to get your just quick ideas. Senator Gallego, Senator Kelly Ball, both being mentioned as possible presidential timber coming up down the road. Both made speeches on their respective, on the Senate floor, actually, both with the amendment by Gallego regarding what we talked about to start the program, which was a public funding rescission. That being said, overall, we'll start with you, Dennis. Is Arizona going to have 2 more people to lose the presidential race?
Well, what's the old saying that in Arizona you can tell your kids to grow up to be anything they want except president?
Yes.
I don't think so. I think so. I don't think Arizona's going to field a presidential candidate here in the near future.
You don't think so?
No.
How come?
Again, maybe I'm too close to the situation. I think that the true leader, whoever's going to lead this party in 2028, just hasn't been identified yet.
Interesting. What do you think, Cameron?
I don't know. I mean, I'm hesitant to say that we would have a president from Arizona in the near future from the Democratic Party. I think Gallego has been maybe the most coy about hinting that he wants to and going to events in Iowa and Pennsylvania and stuff, which is like the playbook of someone who wants to do something federally. And I just don't know if I see it.
Yeah, I was actually talking about this in the newsroom today with some other reporters, and I said some people run for president and some people run for vice president, and Gallego maybe strikes me as the latter, that maybe he's positioning himself that, hey, maybe I might be a candidate, maybe another candidate comes along who wants to win Arizona, which is still kind of considered a swing state, and he might fit that bill, which would then give him a good leg up to the next job in the future.
So you're saying Kelly Gallego ticket?
Well, I don't know about that.
Oh, okay. All right. I wasn't sure. Good to have you all here. Thank you so much for joining us. Good show. And that's it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great weekend.